Hi, good morning, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. I imagine that we're gonna have people kind of joining us as we go through the session, um, just because we realized on our end that we send the link out at 10 o'clock versus it was supposed to be sent a couple minutes before. So I anticipate we'll just have a couple people kind of continue to join us as we go along. We do have a lot of people registered, so hopefully we'll get um, a good group that's going to be joining us today. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get started. Um, I wanted to first and foremost just thank all of you for joining us today. To me, the ultimate luxury is always time. So I appreciate all of you kind of taking this time out in the morning today to be present with us. And we're just spending 45 minutes together, but just really encourage you to take this opportunity to just kind of use it as an opportunity to inspire you, reimagine different possibilities. Um, and of course, I think bringing this community together, I think is really the biggest kind of selling point here. So greetings from Brooklyn. I'm going to ask all of you to kind of share where you're joining us from today. I know we have people that are joining us from all around the world. Um, so I'll post a question um, in the chat here, and if you guys can just let us know where you're joining us from today. All right.
Hello guys, I'm joining you from Germany, in Berlin. This is the main city in Germany, so I'm from there.
Hi, Karina. How are you?
Hi, Leyda.
It's
Nice.
good to see you here.
Good to see you. This time I could make it. So happy to join. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So we have Gary from Upper West Side. Gary, always thanks for joining us. Thank you for always supporting. We have from Amsterdam, Brooklyn, India. So we have a really kind of eclectic group that's joining us today. So if you've never joined us for one of our insight sessions, so I'll give a little background on that. But just quickly, can everybody see my screen? If you could just give me a thumbs up. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Um, so I want to just give an overview into our insight sessions. Um, the insight sessions are really an opportunity for us to just share a lot of the research that we've been doing, a lot of the insights and a lot of the analysis that we've been going through, and just have an opportunity to have more of an open dialogue with our community around these topics. The insight sessions, I think, are just an amazing opportunity. I'll give a little background on CEST DU LUXE in a second, but just to give you some background on the insight sessions, they really came as a product of what we were doing in the trend forecasting space. We're speaking and presenting our research at a lot of different organizations and at conferences all around the world. And I think the biggest thing for me is we have this amazing community that we've built of professionals, of business owners, of thought leaders and experts all across the world that are in the luxury lifestyle space. And I mean, from so many different disciplines. So we have people that are joining. I mean, in the last insight session, we have people that were joining us from travel, from fashion, from interior design, from wine and spirits. And so being able to connect with other professionals that are in the same space as you, dealing with the same challenges as you and thinking about the same strategies, but the fact that you also have this kind of cross-disciplinary approach where you get to see what's working in the interior space, and if there's something from fashion that you can take from that, or vice versa, what's happening in the tech space, what can we take from that in the luxury space, and vice versa. So it's really an opportunity to be just very, very collaborative, and to bring everybody together and really kind of share, um, really kind of sh- share. So before we get started, I really wanted to paint the picture for the insight sessions, the mindset that I want you to have kind of going into it, and really think about what you want to get out of this insight session. So we're really going to be focusing on this new world of digital and luxury fashion. We're going to be touching on a lot of stuff. So I really recommend, if there's things that you go through that we're touching on, that you want to dig in deeper, or that you want to read some report, or that you want to read an article, I definitely recommend, just as we're going through today's insight session, just taking a couple of notes. That way you have that to go back to if there's anything that that you're curious about, that we mentioned, or that you have more, or that you want to know more about. You can always reach out to us as well. So you can reach out to me personally, or you can reach out to anybody on our team by emailing hello@CEST DU LUXE. But if you have any questions about any of the stuff that we covered, just know that this is really meant to be a resource for our community. And the recording of this will also be available on YouTube. So really, this is a resource for you to think about your business in a different way. And really, I'll paint a picture of really the story behind C'EST DU LUXE, but I really want you to kind of think about this mindset going into it. So especially right now, things are so crazy. Like I said, I'm joining you guys from Brooklyn. So many are joining us from so many different places. And as we kind of have gone through this pandemic and gone through this crisis, every market has really had a different challenge to deal with, and has had a different set of rules and parameters to have to operate in. So, like, is your retail still available? Has your manufacturing been disrupted? And really having to consider, so many pieces on the same chessboard right now. So I think right now it's just so important to be flexible. One of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes is "Be like water." And I think that's really what we have to do during this time. Like, we all had plans for 2020, the roaring 20s. They were supposed to be absolutely amazing. And I feel like everybody that I've talked to had, incredibly high hopes for what they wanted out of 2020. And not that you shouldn't still have high hopes, but I think it's really about being flexible and understanding that some things might not work right now, but there are other things that will. So the most important thing to do is be open to change and be willing to change. If you've gone through this crisis so far and you've changed nothing, then I think that should be a wake-up call, because everything else has changed. Your business should also reflect that. So if everything else has changed and you as a business haven't changed, then it's really a time to kind of like reconsider this. Be like water, be flexible, and really think about reimagining. So when it comes to problem solving, sometimes the best answers are the most obvious. And psychologists really say that humans often overlook really elegant solutions that are hidden in plain sight, just because we fixate on what something was supposed to be originally. And so I really kind of want to just leave you with that challenge for the insight session today. But instead of thinking about how things are or how things have been, really thinking about how can you, throw out of this, if you had to start your business all over today, if you had to go after a completely new market today, if you had to start digital for the first time today, and maybe these were things that you were already planning to do in 2020. But I think all of these are things that you should consider as part of your strategy and figure out really what works for you. So main thing here is to transform your anxiety into excitement. So I heard this about a week ago. A friend of mine shared it with me, and it really kind of resonated with me, because I feel like I said, I'm in Brooklyn. There's so much that's happening in New York, but there's so much that's happening all over the world. And every person that I've talked to in our community has been affected by this to some, at some level, whether that has meant like shifting gears and adjusting something slightly, or whether that has meant a complete overhaul or pause of some businesses. Everybody is really kind of dealing with something. So whether it's reassessing production calendars, manufacturing, retail disruptions, thinking about excess inventory, it's really kind of shift the mindset of anxiety and excitement. It's going to be the same feeling internally. So kind of think about it from that perspective. Your body is going to feel it the same exact way, but it's your decision on whether you want to see this as anxiety and something stressful, or whether you want to see this as like positive energy that you can be intentional about. And this I heard, really, this was at the beginning of the pandemic, and Marc Jacobs was really, I think the fashion houses have just done an incredible job at being incredibly responsive with everything that's going on. And like I said, even though we're focusing on digital today also takes into the consideration everything that's been going on. So I don't want to, kind of I don't want to kind of, ignore the current situation. So Marc Jacobs, he was sharing this. I think this was like right when the pandemic started, so maybe a couple of weeks in. So maybe like the end of March. And I think this was just a great quote, just because the Marc Jacobs brand is really kind of going through a lot. They had the majority of their fabrics coming from Italy, so you can imagine just what a disruption they've had to deal with from a manufacturing standpoint. And even where they've had retail locations open, for example, they haven't had a collection to put in those retail collections. To put in those retail stores. So incredibly challenging, but same thing, really thinking about the mindset, moving anxiety to excitement. And Marc Jacobs, really, despite everything that's going on, his mindset was really from emergency comes emerge, and really think about, what is this going to give birth to? How are you going to flourish during this and coming out of the other side? You can't change the situation, but what you can really change is your reaction to that situation. So a little bit about me. So my name is Leyda Hernandez. I'm the president and CEO of C'EST DU LUXE. I'm sure most of you, if you're joining us today, I'm sure you're familiar with the company to some extent. But what we do, we're a global luxury lifestyle trend forecasting and consulting firm. We're based here in New York. C'EST DU LUXE really came from the belief of bringing more data-driven intelligence, market intelligence, to the luxury and lifestyle spaces. So a lot of the expectation that we had from the tech world, in terms of tools, in terms of skill set, really bringing that in, and coming in as a strong kind of like business partner, insight partner for the luxury and lifestyle space. So the company really was formed out of that, being able to bridge these two worlds of art and science. And so we've spoken at conferences all around the world. We've worked with organizations all around the world, both on our trend forecasting side and also on the consulting side. And these insight sessions are really, a result of how we see the future of luxury. We are obsessed with the future of luxury, and that's really where the company was born from. So being able to look at trends, data, and being able to make decisions, not about where your business is today, but where your business should be in 5 years, 20 years time, and really being able to make kind of like data-driven decisions out of that. So the insight sessions really come from that, to be able to use this as a tool to support our community. So we've kind of heard from a little bit of who's in the room. So I'm really excited just to welcome all of you today. I mean, we have people from, thank you all for joining us. I love the fact that every time we have an insight session, it's just, obviously we see some of the same faces, but I love the fact that every time it's like, oh, you're like from Mexico, or you're, all these different places where you didn't necessarily expect people to be joining us. So again, just thank you very much for kind of dedicating your morning to be with us. All right, so now let's really dig into our topic today. So today we're really exploring this topic of, the digital future of luxury fashion. There was so much that was already happening in the digital luxury space before the coronavirus started. If you joined us for our last insight session that was focused on the future of luxury, we really talked about, not about fashion specifically, but we talked about the future of luxury from the perspective of generations. And so if you're looking at the future of luxury, right now, it's really been a balancing act between two major generations, which is baby boomers and millennials. And so as we move, as we go towards 2025, the stats are that millennials are supposed to make up 50% of the market by 2025. And so before we really thought about digital as a millennial thing. And so because they weren't the main player in the luxury market, maybe it wasn't necessarily an audience that you were going after. You know, luxury in some ways was very hesitant to embrace all of the digital strategies that many other brands have, and of course that's shifting. I think fashion is one of the most is the space where you see that space that change most predominantly, of exploring Instagram, social selling. I think Gucci as a success story over the last couple of years, of going from a $6 billion brand to like a $15 billion brand, I think shows just the return of investment that luxury brands can have, that luxury fashion houses can have when they're focusing on digital. But the last insight session, we talked about that was really the balancing act between these two generations. However, because of everything that's happening with the pandemic, what we're really seeing is that instead of treating it as two completely different groups that behave completely differently, thinking about the fact that baby boomers are going to be just more online during this time and post and after this period. And so instead of thinking about digital as a millennial thing, thinking about digital as a luxury thing, and that it's just going to be a luxury thing, period. And that there won't be this kind of separation between the luxury world and the digital world, you know, in a lot of the same ways that we saw before. So just kind of prefacing the conversation, you know, there's been this big shift in terms of which generations are really taking a stronghold of the luxury market. So again, both of these are very important players, but the key thing I do want to point out is just things were heading in a direction that was very digital before this crisis. And what this crisis has done is just really speed that up. It's sped that up, but also brought on audiences that we thought were going to be, you know, we're going to take a lot longer to bring onto digital, like baby boomers. That transition has happened a lot more quickly, of them being open to shop online. So one of the biggest things, I've kind of grouped this into just major categories that I've seen, and that I want people to really think about, especially when it comes to fashion and just the opportunities that you have right now to grow your business online. Everybody's at home, or everybody's, for the most part, at home. So it's really about thinking about how you're going to reach those audiences at home. You don't have those same opportunities. So really kind of shifting gears, how can we, you know, create those same worlds, but create them online? So, so one of the things I want everybody to think about is just exploring other marketplaces. There's been just really thinking about this, going back to that quote of being like water and being flexible, thinking about marketplaces maybe the same way that you would think about your retail strategy. So if you're thinking about marketplaces just as, you know, where are you selling your product, and not thinking about this is retail, this is e-commerce, and whether something is offline or online, but if you're really thinking at marketplaces as opportunities to sell your product, and outlets to sell your product, this is a good time to really explore other marketplaces. So especially if you've had, you know, especially if you've had a good chunk of your retail strategy, or if you were planning to grow your retail strategy this year in terms of traditional retail, this is a good time to really think about, you know, what other marketplaces, whether they are American or whether they're American or an overseas marketplace, just really thinking about how can you expand your reach during this time. So over the last week, I'm sure a lot of you saw these headlines over the last 2 weeks, but really thinking about this idea of marketplace. There's so many marketplaces, whether it's vintage, whether it's resale, whether it's new items. There's a lot of luxury and premium marketplaces today. But I think one of the biggest news stories that came out over the last couple of weeks is just what Amazon has done in the luxury fashion space. And so there's just been a lot of question in the last month as to how luxury fashion is going to adapt to, you know, to basically the elimination of their retail. Um, and a big way that luxury shopping has been done over the last couple of years is that digital has played a role in influencing the sale about 75% of the time. And so digital has a huge amount of influence and a huge amount of power over whether somebody is ultimately going to buy that item or not. But what we have seen is that even though digital was playing a huge role in influencing the purchase, the actual purchase was not being made digitally. Like it was still being made that they would go into a store, they would go into an outlet, and that the the purchase, the point of transaction, would still happen in person at a retail location. So this has really kind of opened up, this has really kind of cracked the egg for luxury fashion. The fact that, you really had digital playing a role in the earlier parts of the sale, but you didn't have digital playing a role in terms of actually making that sale. And so now that you've eliminated kind of the entire retail strategy, for an industry that was heavily reliant on the fact that the last part was going to be in person and retail. So the fact that we were heavily reliant on that being the last part of the stage, and now that that's missing, it's really kind of cracked the egg open and brought into question just, how do you bounce back from that when the customer journey wasn't really built to adapt this way? So how do you move these like final purchases? How do you move them online? And so it's really kind of been a scramble. Have had a lot of companies that have launched new e-commerce websites over the last couple of months. You have also had companies that really invested in e-commerce beforehand. So I would say probably like a Gucci and a Versace that were really investing in e-commerce beforehand, just have basically doubled down on their websites. And so as their retail locations have closed, they've just doubled down on e-commerce, and they're seeing, kind of like Black Friday holiday sales numbers from their e-commerce in order by doing that. A lot of other luxury brands, like I said, are starting e-commerce stores for the first time. And then you do have many other brands that will just not go onto the e-commerce game in terms of building their own stores. So what does that mean? That means that for these brands to survive, they will end up on marketplaces. So that change is definitely going to happen, but is definitely something that you as a company should be open to and considering what marketplaces might make sense. If this was not part of something that if this wasn't something that made sense as a part of your strategy before the crisis, it might make sense as a part of your strategy now. Just thinking about marketplaces replacing retail and that last point of purchase. So Amazon has really kind of stepped in here. So they launched Common Threads with it, which is a new Amazon platform that was done in partnership with the CFDA. And it's really just focused on luxury designers selling online. So like I said, marketplaces are really going to be kind of a big direction for a lot of luxury fashion brands because of retail closing, but it's going to, well, not marketplaces in general, e-commerce is going to be a big area of movement from retail. But it's really going to depend on how set up you are. Did you have an e-commerce that you can double down on? Are you starting e-commerce for the first time? Are you not able to do e-commerce on your own at all? In which case, a marketplace is definitely something to be considered. Either as a replacement to your retail strategy, or just as as a way to kind of augment your sales outlets during this time. So I wanted to highlight Bulgari because I feel like they've been doing a lot of interesting things during this crisis. And there's a lot of brands that have done a lot of experimentation and have been very open to trying a lot of different things in the last couple of months, which is incredibly exciting because, like I said, I think the direction was definitely going towards luxury fashion. It was definitely going towards digital for luxury fashion, but the push and the changes weren't happening fast enough. So in some ways, it is very exciting just to see a lot of these brands being open to different types of digital stories, different places to sell their products, and just being more open in a way that you would not have seen them even just a year ago. And the internet is obviously can be a very daunting place, especially for a luxury brand, because you don't have that same ability to manage exclusivity. You can't really control the brand image as much. So it's been very kind of daunting, I think, for a lot of luxury brands to go out there and experiment. But I think one of the biggest things that we've seen during this crisis and just this big change to digital, is that whether you are experimenting on that platform or not, you will have your fans and your customers that will be experimenting on that platform on your behalf. So it's better if you participate in the conversation, because they're already going to be talking about your brand already. You're already going to be included in all of these things. So I think it's just really interesting, the different kind of approach that people have taken. So Bulgari is a very interesting one. They've joined Tmail in the last couple of months, the last month or so, as well as a bunch of other brands have joined as well. So you can see Prada as there as well. But just thinking of this idea of exploring marketplaces. So Tmall is a Chinese-based website talking about online retail. It comes from the Alibaba group, so same kind of like very e-commerce marketplace focus. However, it's really meant to sell kind of like brand name goods in mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan. You have over 500 million monthly active users on this website. And actually this was a couple of years ago, so we probably have updated stats now, but you can think about just the amount of growth during that time. And it's one of the world's third most visited websites, according to Alexa. So you can see that these marketplaces, although they may sound very niche to us because we're much more familiar with Amazon. Although these marketplaces might sound very niche, they're actually a huge opportunity that are definitely worth exploring. So Bulgari has definitely joined has kind of joined that conversation. Ying Daily has put together a really good article in this guide here. So I definitely recommend, if you are interested in just seeing what's going on in Tmail. They have different kinds of sections depending on the kind of brand that you are. So think about just different kinds of retail experiences. So Tmall is a little bit more of a more sophisticated marketplace, I would say, for a luxury brand versus Amazon, where you will kind of be grouped with everything else that's on Amazon. But I definitely recommend just kind of checking out the guide if Tmall is something that you want to look more into. But again, the whole idea is just explore more of these marketplace opportunities. There are a lot of them, and there are a lot of great ways to kind of like expand your reach. So the second thing I want to focus on is just discovering new ways to socialize. So we really talked about kind of moving retail in a different direction. So let's talk about moving the socializing aspect of all of our businesses towards a new direction. So you really have to make up for this lack of socialization that's happening in all of these other areas. So we're thinking conferences, events, meetings, all of these things are now, have been eliminated, whether they're showrooms, fashion shows, literally all of these things have been eliminated. And so really thinking about, forcing yourself to kind of lean into that challenge of how can you make your business recession proof? How can you make your business kind of like a digital first business if you had to? And showing just like that this is a perfect case study for if you had to, just being prepared for that kind of scenario. So, but one of the big things I want to kind of to keep in mind is just discovering new ways of socializing, right? So we've eliminated all of these other things. However, we still have social media, which is taking up just like a huge amount of screen time, of participant time. If you look at media consumption over the last couple of months, I mean, even just looking at the streaming services themselves, so streaming media content, all of that has gone up. So even if you feel like your revenue has gone down, the amount of conversations in your industry and your space have not. And so remembering that this kind of socializing on social media is not a way to just get your brand out there and so that people don't forget about you, which is incredibly important during a crisis, but the bigger opportunities here is really that this is a business opportunity, and realizing that social selling leads to social buying. There's so many platforms now. Instagram is one of them, WeChat is another, that you can buy directly on the platform itself, without having to leave to go onto a website, without having to go onto a marketplace, but that the traffic and the commerce is really bridged together on that one platform. So social selling leads to social buying. So really thinking about social media not as a way to just, keep your brand awareness, but thinking about social media as the new sales room, as the new showroom. How can you recreate that experience? And like I said, this is a time of change. If you haven't changed your social media strategy since this started, this is a good time to kind of, really, really think about how your business is reflecting the change that's happening in the world. So I wanted to share this quote. This is from Bulgari's CEO. And I just think it's a really interesting perspective of looking at digital and really looking at just kind of the leaders in the space. So the question is, in this kind of market in China, how much room is there for innovation and new thinking? How do you encourage that? And his response was, there's a lot of room for innovation. In the area of communications, this is the #1 digital country worldwide, and its importance cuts across generations. So like I said, even if China is not a huge market for you, I think it's really interesting for you to even just play around on there. Play around on TikTok and see what some of the features are, because those will be features that you will eventually see on Instagram, on Facebook, and the platforms that we use. So it's not only about millennials in China. So continuing with the quote, it's not only millennials in China that use mobile communications to do everything, it's everyone. WeChat in China is a good example of an application that is much more advanced than what's in the Western world. If we absorb our digital learning from China and other markets, we will be better competitors in the rest of the world. So really thinking about the fact that, these people are going to be on these platforms having conversations about your brand, having conversations about the kind of thing that you do. And so it's really about you participating in that. So actually, here we go. So Burberry, I think, is a really interesting example. They've just joined TikTok. And like I said, just really seeing a lot of interesting things from a lot of fashion brands, and them being very open to trying different things that they were not open to even just a year ago. So realizing that TikTok and that these digital audiences are going to have a huge value, because you no longer have your retail audience. You no longer have the audience that goes to the fashion show, that goes to the showroom. You no longer have these audiences, period, during this time, but you still need audiences. And so being able to move those audiences into a digital audience, I think, is a huge, just strategy change that you see a lot of fashion houses taking. So Burberry, I think, is an excellent one, because they are brand new to TikTok. And they just have 2 videos. Like, they literally just have 2 videos. And you can already see that they have, over 25,000 followers. And so just stepping into TikTok meant, that already meant that there was a huge audience and a conversation around the brand. Burberry is now just stepping in to kind of collect that audience for themselves. So you don't generate this kind of following after just doing 2 videos. You generate this kind of following after just doing 2 videos, because your audience was already there, and now you just gave them a home which to go to. So whether that's your strategy, like I said, everybody's kind of going to be going through a different challenge. So, take everything I'm saying today with a grain of salt. Think about what really works for you and what really works for your brand. But you have seen a lot of luxury brands starting to embrace TikTok. And I think it's really important just to be on the brand, being on these platforms, even if it's not a core part of your strategy. So Burberry can just stay with these 2 videos. But it doesn't, but I think it's important for them to at least have a home there. It doesn't mean that you now need to come up with an entire content calendar to go after it. Maybe that's not where you are with the platform, but I think it's important to at least have a home there. So the reason for that is you have all these luxury brands that are embracing TikTok now, but knockoffs are also on the platform. And so if Burberry, themselves as a brand is not on the platform, all that is being shared, not all that's being shared, but a lot of the content that's being shared is actually fake Burberry products and dupes of the products. So I think it's important for you to step in as the brand and really kind of take ownership of that. So yeah, so whether you're on the, whether you are starting on the platform, or whether you're growing on the platform, like I said, these conversations are happening. So I think it's really important for just to step in. And so just some quick kind of, tips of just ways to play around. What Burberry has done with theirs is that they've just been testing out TikTok challenges. So the two things that they've done are TikTok challenges, something that just goes viral on TikTok, and then they try to recreate it on their own. But I think that's a very kind of low hanging fruit. They're not putting together, a whole content calendar for this. They're just looking at things that go viral and seeing if there's some kind of content that they can make related to them. And that's really the extent of how they're playing around with it. Dolce & Gabbana is on the platform as well. They've taken on a different strategy, and their strategy is really kind of turning to influencers that are already big on TikTok, and using that collaboration as a way to grow their audience. So there's lots of different ways to kind of play around here in terms of content. But the most important thing, I think, is just to get out there, and to just test it out, try it out, and see if this is something that makes sense for you or not. So before you go to the extent of putting together an entire content calendar and all of that, I just want to remind, like, the success of all of these social media platforms will depend on the content that you put up, will depend on collaboration, and will depend on consistency of that content. Like I said, you might not be at the point where you are ready to invest all three of these into a social media platform. But I think it's important to understand that if you are really going to lean completely into YouTube, if you are going to lean completely into TikTok, or Instagram, to think about what this is actually going to mean as a long-term, like, business strategy, what level of investment resources need to be dedicated to that. All right, so don't forget the classics. So we talked about marketplaces. We talked about kind of finding these new communities and these new ways to socialize. And I want to kind of take a step back and take a step forward, because I feel like we're really going to be talking about the classics of a digital strategy, but classics that have never really gone away and are no less important today. So for me, the biggest one that I want to kind of emphasize is search, because e-commerce and social media, I feel like, are getting a lot of attention right now, and they should be getting a lot of attention, because I think that's where the biggest shifts are happening in terms of people's marketing strategies and digital strategies. However, I want to emphasize just how important search is, when it's layered into social media, when it's layered into your marketplaces, but just thinking about this as a core part of everything that you do digitally. So it's not enough to just put together content, but you need people to be able to find that content. And that's really what search gives you. It builds these avenues and these streets for people to be able to, have these paths that lead to your brand. So, so Google, really kind of always thinking about Google optimizing for search engines. Amazon is a search engine itself. So even though we're thinking about Amazon's new kind of like common thread initiative that's meant for luxury fashion designers, and we're really thinking about it as it's a marketplace, join this marketplace and your products will be available there. The success of your brand on Amazon will still depend on search and how well your listings are, what your keywords look like, reviews, photos, all of these things will be components of kind of like how robust that listing is going to be from a search perspective, and not just how well it'll show up on Google, but how well it'll actually show up within the Amazon system. Same thing for YouTube. YouTube is owned by Google, so you can think of just the same kind of like SEO emphasis that Google would have for websites. thinking of the same thing for YouTube. It's not just enough to put the content out there, but you really have to put, put some links in the description, really kind of like built it out. Think about what the title of that video is going to be. So really kind of, how can you name your files? So all the way down to what are you naming your files, right? And so Bulgaria, I wanted to show just as an example, because I feel like they've done a lot of really exciting things over the last couple of months. When it comes to digital, I mean, they've really grown from their social perspective, from an e-commerce marketplace perspective. So they're definitely a brand to look at in terms of, the direction to go in. However, but when you look at Bulgaria's website, on their homepage, they make just a very fundamental SEO error, where they don't have an H1 that's really being picked up by a search engine, which is just like the one major header that you have on your website, per page. So even something simple like this, you can grow in all of these other areas, but the main point of search is for people to be able to find you. So if you're doing social media, you're doing e-commerce, you're doing marketplaces, making sure that you are, that you're not kind of, getting lazy on that point of optimizing for search and making sure that people will find you. Bulgaria, like I said, is doing an amazing job, but just to kind of bring them down to size, I wanted to just show, that even they have room for improvement. This is a really new, digital is a very new area for a lot of luxury and fashion brands. So, so there is still a lot of opportunity to grow. So just think about, different businesses are going to require different kinds of approaches. Don't stress yourself too heavy about what the right thing is. I don't think there is a right anything right now. I think there's the best possible at this time, right? So really don't stress yourself, really kind of open yourself to opportunities, to possibilities. Remembering to stay flexible is the most important thing. Everything is changing. So you as a business need to change. You as a person need to be open to change. But really kind of, honing this in, that this is something that all of us are experiencing as a community and collectively. So we are also here for you as well. So we have a couple of events. On June 10th, we're going to have a search immersive, which is actually going to be focusing on search engine optimization. So that's more of a workshop if you want to really kind of like dig in and have more of a boot camp around search. On June 26th, we'll have our next insight session. So similar to this, but it'll focus on the evolution of home and lifestyle, and just how, how this year has really kind of changed that, what the trends are, what the opportunities are in that space. And July 8th, we're going to have an analytics immersive, which is similar, like boot camp workshop style, but focused on Google Analytics and just taking more of a data-driven digital approach. But I wanted to thank you all for coming. We're a little bit over on time, but I wanted to thank you all for coming. I appreciate all of you taking the time out to spend this time this Friday morning with us, or whatever time it is where you are. But appreciate you taking this time for us and really kind of ending the week on a really strong, positive, inspiring note. Hopefully these insights were really helpful for you. And remember that we're here if you have any questions, any follow-ups, if you have any suggestions on future insight sessions or what you would want to see or challenges that you're dealing with in your business. These are really meant to support our community. So we want to be reflective of that. So let us know what's going on with you, and we can kind of like tailor these things also. So feel free to email us. You can find us on Instagram as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to give us a shout. And then we'll just wrap up here. But thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you.
It was great to see all of your faces, and great after such a long week of not seeing anybody. So such a great way to kind of like end the week and have a good Friday. Enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Leyda.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.